Today I'm going to play through all the guitar parts on track number 2, Wander. I'm going to go unplugged this time because the trouble of feeding through my headphones, it doesn't really sound that great, so this is for audio quality reasons. If the audio on this video doesn't sound too great, then I'm just going to jump back onto acoustic. But because I'm doing Wander today, I'm going to have to show off leads, so I'm going to have to play on this baby anyway. So Wander was one of the later songs I wrote for the album. I placed it right after Apathy in terms of song progression in order to highlight the contrast that's between the two tracks and really show off the range of influences I was trying to incorporate into my demo. This is the longest song on the album and it's the biggest composition. It's about 11 minutes long and it transitions from section to section and there's 2 guitar solos in between. I demonstrated how to play the primary riff before when going through my riff writing process. Basically, I take a moving melodic line and combine it with a stable bass line to create my 2-note riff, just like in a standard black metal technique. So the riff here sounds like this. The melodic line is this cyclic pattern here. It's completely on the 5th string. It's played over 2 measures of E, 1 measure of C, and 1 measure of D for a very classic heavy metal 1-6-7 progression that's consistent through the entire song. The harmonies on this track overall focus on 3rd and 5th, so this is a really standard diatonic triad-based music. So after the first verse, I come in with a different riff. It's sort of just a transition between the 2 verses. It uses the same chord progression, but it's not derivative of the first, so I don't consider it to be a secondary riff. It sounds like this. So it's an E octave for 1 measure. Then I add the 5th on top to play a power chord for another measure. When we get to a C and D, there's a melody that goes on the 3rd string. This riff is made up of a 3-note chord, which I'm holding down the E on the 5th string consistently as a pedal point throughout the entire riff, and I'm shifting the harmonies on the 4th, the melody on the 4th string, and the bass note on the 6th string. It's actually a pretty nifty motion here. I start with a C major 7, move to a major 6, to an octave, then I hop my pinky down to the D, and drop the ring finger down to play a D sus2 with a major 6, which resolves to a regular D sus2. So the section after this is when we hit the clean arpeggiated chords. There's a tempo switch, so the whole song slows down a bit. The notes that are played are the exact same for all the chords except for the bass note. So I hold an F sharp on the 4th string, and I play the open G and an open B. And these all act as pedal points. The only motion is shifting from E to C and D. I definitely did a better job playing it on the recording, but I haven't been playing these songs in a really long time, so I'm a bit rusty. The way I'm playing it is for maximum efficiency, so you'll see that I'm playing the E arpeggio with the index finger and the pinky, which leaves my middle 2 fingers open, so I can use those to pull down and play the C Lydian 4th. And then this leaves my other fingers in position to slide up to a D major 3rd. So there are harmonics that go on top of this. We start with a 12th fret E, down to a 7th fret F sharp, which I bend by just pushing down my Floyd Rose with the palm of my hand. And then we go to a D that's bent up. 12th fret B, and then a 7th fret A. So on the recording itself, every other note alternates on two separate tracks that are panned, and that creates, I think, a pretty cool effect. The next piece after this is solo number 1. The tab for this that I'm going to add isn't completely accurate. There's some liberties that I took when I'm playing the solo. Mostly it's just hammer-ons and pull-offs for extra flair. So step by step, the solo starts off with a straightforward ascending sequence. And then we go into this descending sliding mode. After that, we have a staggered arpeggio. The next melodies are mostly just neighboring tones that go back and forth. Then we have this series of pull-offs on the 3rd string. That moves up to the 2nd string. And then we get to the last 2 lines, which are my favorite part of the solo. The first piece is a condensed version of the main riff. And the final line is the exact melody of riff 2. So this solo does a really good job keeping the pieces from the earlier parts of the song in mind. The next verse is just over a very, very simple 1-1-6-7. It's just the exact chord progression with no melody. This builds up to riff 2, which comes back at this new section just at a slower tempo. Now we get to the next 2 riffs, which are my favorite part of the song. They're both secondary variations of the main riff. From the first variation, we start on the 3rd of E, and then we go all the way down to the 7. Then we switch up to C and D's, we start climbing all the way up. The next variation shifts up to the 5th of the E and maintains the same pattern. Going down to the 2nd, then switching to a C5, to a D6, that stretches up to a 7. The riff immediately after this, we get 2 bars of something that's kind of like a secondary variation of riff 2, and it just leads us into the 2nd solo. So we start with E5, where we left off, which slides up to the octave, down to a C5, up to a D6, which resolves to a D5. So solo 2. The solo 2 starts on B and we have this bending melody. And this leads up to a B that slides out, and then we slide into an E on the 4th string. Then we sweep up the chord. Then we go to a D arpeggio. Then we have this descending sequence down the 1st string to 1st position, and then down the fretboard, and then down the string. Then we have this extended E minor arpeggio. That finishes on the sliding piece. After this, we repeat both secondary riffs as before. And the final new piece is this crazy riff. That's sort of like it's supposed to be like a secondary variation of the secondary variation to riff 2 that came in before the guitar solo, if that makes any sense. So we start with an E power chord, slide up to a 3rd with an octave at the end, and then we add the C to this, so it's a crazy stretch. And then the 4th string piece moves down, and then we go to a suspended D. So I really liked this riff, but when it came down to play it, the effort that I had to put into it and the way it sounded when it came out didn't sound too great. It didn't seem worth it, so I decided to reinforce it by playing the melody as a tremolo picked lead on top. So it's in B. And then after this, the song just starts over from the beginning and we kick back to the original tempo. So this is basically all the guitar parts to Wander.